Greetings. Welcome back to the Cape Lead Revolution with yet again another edition of Leaders with Leaders. This time sitting here, my old boss, my friend, my comrade in arms, the commander of the 314th Airlift Wing, Little Rock Air Force Base in Arkansas, Col Steve Hodge. Colonel Hodge.
Hey, good to see you, Chachi. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is
love the accoutrement, the gray beard.
Oh,
you are one. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so ugly. It's in a transition period. We'll totally go from there.
That's funny.
But for all of our viewers and listeners out there, if you would mind taking a few minutes, just tell us a little bit about you and who you are.
Yeah, so Steve Hodge, have the luxury of being in command yet again. It's one of those things that either you really love it and thrive in it, and it's something that becomes part of you, but the best part of all of that is still just working with the people you get a chance to. So our shared experiences were huge in that. For a long time, I defined myself on the platform, the network of C-130 business and the Herc Nation that's out there. It's really been something that's been deep into me as an Air Force kid. My dad was a C-130 guy. We've traded stories. We've flown the same tail numbers. He promoted me in the back of an airplane. So I'm often in that he's flown. So oftentimes I define myself based on those experiences as to who I am. But over the last several years, it's evolved as to who I am. And really, one of my favorite questions is why. And my why has evolved over the last little bit. But working with people and who I am has grown with me. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about it. But when we built a command team, that why wasn't necessarily sufficient, and that's why when we reach out and we build a command team and we start thinking some of those things, one of the reasons why we got a chance to work together is because I needed somebody who was an extreme extrovert with a sweet beard and the ability to throw on a leprechaun costume or something like that to break through and really connect with the people. So the command team has become one of those things that has helped define me. And the whole team building concept and how I make decisions, and that has started to define what I think that I can bring to the fight, and it has helped become part of who I am. To your question, so tell me a little bit about you. Yeah, that's kind of the level of service that I hope to bring is the teaming aspect of this more so than a platform centric. But growing up in a crew airplane, in a crew family, and 3 older sisters that raised me properly, and a couple of parents that were fantastic in raising me in that kind of environment. Really helped to be able to understand that I had 3 older sisters, 3 conversations going in. I could track all of those and then go into an environment that can help do that. But those are some of the things that were defining elements of how I have gotten to where I am at the moment. And make no mistake, I have not done that alone. So hopefully that'll help set the stage for what we want to talk about with you today and really get after it.
And so we were kind of talking a little bit about before. Colonel Hodge was my wing commander, and I was his command chief. We were deployed summer of 17 to summer of 18, and your long deployments are tough to begin with.
Check.
Not to mention we had some significant personnel and or personality challenges.
Absolutely.
And not to mention some of the other things. And one of the things that I forever just kind of haunts me is that when you did squadron command,
yes,
you lost a guy early on in that command.
Sure did. Yep.
Same thing with group command.
Absolutely.
And we kind of talked, and the first time I met you was you briefing
yes.
The crash of a C-130 in Afghanistan taking off out of Jalalabad. And so that was kind of impactful. And then we worked together, and then lo and behold, within a month of you showing up,
right, one
of our guys has a heart attack.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? How do you understand loss? How do you lead through loss? What advice do you have for our audience out there?
Well, one, it's not easy for anybody, right? So being sympathetic is one of those, not just empathetic, but sympathetic to the case at hand. I learned a lot of lessons in that message. But the biggest kicker and the biggest key to the environment was kind of 3 things kind of kept me through all of those events. First of all, understanding my role as a leader. That's time to lead. Those types of environments, the struggles, the tough times. On the inside of my academy ring, it says tough times don't last. Tough people do is the rest of that punchline. And you don't get tough by yourself. It's a team fight. So from that, the focus that you get, the strength that you get from the people that you're trying to help, crying with your folks, working with your folks, helping them through the times of toughness. That became my why, if you will, is if we do this properly, we'll be stronger on the other side. So that became the guiding light. As a young lieutenant, we lost an airplane up in Jackson Hole, and I watched that unit heal properly and became stronger on the other side, and used the remembrance of our fallen to help say the names and to work through that. And I had great examples both there and then through a couple of command courses where we had an opportunity to just talk about loss. What happens in that process? What's going to need to happen? What are the resources and things that are available? So painfully, I was fairly comfortable in that space to begin with. What became a little bit more of a challenge was the live action of interacting with the families of the fallen. But those are the key and essential elements for our service. That's a part of it. And when we lose people, that's so important to get that aspect right, and that we continue to not only take the care of the people becomes that driving factor, the care for the airmen becomes that driving factor, and care for the families become the absolute factor that really drives you. And in that space, it's really difficult to make sure you take care of yourself because people are absolutely reliant upon you. So, I try to visit all 4 rooms every day, but spiritual helped me without any hesitation. I will tell you that my spiritual backing absolutely helped me get through these. We can talk about that as much as you want. I'm happy to do that. But having a very strong faith and a belief structure that helps me get through to know. I had lost grandparents before. I had dealt with some loss before. It wasn't a foreign ground to me necessarily. Helping out some of the young, especially after the accident, was their first experience with loss. Especially, youngsters are bulletproof. You know what I mean? And they don't know any better. So to have that first taste of, my life's not forever. That's a very scary proposition. But crying with your people, put your arm around their shoulders and helping them through that becomes absolutely imperative is one, but it becomes your driven factor. Why are you here? And it's to help people guide through that loss process. So that aspect, my social strength absolutely comes from my wife, Amy, without a doubt, because we talk to each other consistently about these types of things, and we've cried our way through a couple different things just because that's kind of what we do, and we grow closer together because of the shared experiences from that. So leading through loss is never an easy thing, but taking care of yourself, the relentless amount of time it takes, but there's times that even as a leader, your people are looking towards you for guidance, and they're looking towards you to help them get through this pain, and that is the driven factor that helped me through those things, as I could see that. And in each case, I did fine as a leader until a couple different specific aspects, and I'll bring them out because there's reality to this, right? So when we lost Carl Brochi, I was fine until TAPS, until we got to stand there and watch the team do their thing for the honor guard, and that was a hard point for me on that first one. As we were standing on the ramp at Dover, watching my guys come back, that's a very difficult time. But in both cases, I had some outstanding people standing right beside me. That the social aspect of that really, really solidified the fact that I wasn't there alone, and I could keep going because I knew it meant something. So that drive and that purpose and the resilience, if you will use the word in that fashion here, really helped in that space to know that I had somebody right beside me that was walking, and then it became inspirational for me to be that person, hopefully that can help 1, 2, 5, 10 somebody through that experience too. But the training that I received, the exercising that we did, if you remember, after we got to the desert, one of the first things I did was I held a loss of an airman drill, and true to form, guess what? We executed it. And we sure executed it in short order. That's one that I find is an incredibly effective tool for leaders, is to you can't shy away from the hard stuff. Go practice right now.
Yeah.
And if you train properly, your people will trust you, and you'll trust them. It goes both directions. And as we walk through that very difficult space and loss, we were able to help navigate our team through that. And for that, I was so thankful that you've dealt with loss in your own career and your life, heavily so. But from that, that became inspirational as a command team. Going, okay, how people mourn and how they deal with loss. You never get over it. You only learn how to live with it. So from that, our ability to have an honest conversation, to cover down on elements of people that thought more like you versus people who thought more like me, the whole team, it became a mosaic of leadership, if you will, that we could sample and see how people were working through those times and spaces of their own humanity. That timeline's not set. And then as the scab comes off periodically, we saw this several times after the accident in Jalalabad, was, hey, people go on a story, hey, how'd you know how to do that? Well, Jordan taught me that. And the scab comes off for a moment. You got to respect that. And you got to put an arm around him at that point. You go, say his name again. Jordan taught me that. JJ taught me that. So having those bits and pieces was very helpful. And during Memorial Days, we'll finish it off and we'll say the rest of the name. JH taught me this. Ryan was there for that. And to have those conversations then becomes a healing aspect, and one that you embrace, and you become stronger on the other side. So that's kind of the element of where I thought we were in pretty good stead, is that I had dealt with some of those things before, and I'd seen some of the hard parts of that, so I could at least have an initial vector of where we wanted to go and what the other side looked like. Kind of fun. Of recency, we just had our Resilience Tactical Pause Day, and what was something that just popped into my head after we were starting to work through that was an acronym called HOPE. And HOPE is very helpful to me in this space to be able to talk through it. But HOPE means, in this particular case, a mnemonic device, and the H is have faith. Have faith in yourself to deal with the problem. Have faith, greater part of you. Have faith in your service. A greater being. Have faith. That's the first step, is have faith that you can do this, and you won't have to do that alone, but you have faith. For us, the O would mean, for me, the O means the other side. There's a vision. There's a place you're going to go after this. That's not the end state. Your issue, your problem is not the end. That's the beginning. That's the obstacle that's in your way, or the challenge that's in front of you. Life doesn't take a straight path. It goes through ups and downs and sideways and crookeds, and it doesn't survive contact with the world. But that's what the O meant to me. P was very helpful. This is where you need friends, but that's positive action. So take that first step. Take the step and go to a helping agency, if you will, to a friend that can help you out on this thing. A wise chief that can help struggle through some of those spaces. You can have an honest conversation, advice, a friend, a completely unrelated conversation with somebody you just met downtown, but maybe they had a shared experience. But take that first positive action step, and then the E is the hard one. Enjoy your life. This is part of it. Challenge is part of life. And there's a couple things I've watched lately, a couple motivational videos on YouTube that are pretty helpful. But I'll quote one from Mario Effect, and sadly I can't remember the guy who spoke about it. It was fantastic. But the enjoy your life piece about this, if you see everything as if it's a game, we don't get all bent out of shape when we fall into a pit on that video game. So why do we have that reaction in life? Your life's not going to end. There's another side to that. You're just going to pick up your control and go again. So pick up your control and let's go after it. Enjoy the trip. Build your connections. Awesome. And I think that was very helpful, and that kind of helped me explain. And it's kind of cute with the HOPE acronym. But the rest of it, it's useful. Maybe it's an effective tool to help out. But that one's been kind of mulling in my head lately as a useful tool that people can walk with.
And if there's one viewer, one listener out there who hears this,
maybe it helps.
Maybe it helps.
Maybe if one.
Yeah, if one.
If one.
There's gonna be plenty.
It helped me, so there's my one.
It's so it's funny. So I, your command time kind of started with that with Papa when he passed.
Yeah.
But then but just like we're giggling now, I look back on that year. Yeah. And deployments are always the best worst times of your life. But man, could we laugh.
Yeah, oftentimes at each other, and that was so refreshing. Yeah, I mean, from our very first conversation, when I grilled you pretty hard during your selection process, if you remember correctly. Hey dude, how'd you like doing the desert? Sweet, let's do this. So you're my command chief, congratulations. Is this the interview? Nah, that's over. Yeah. Let's go do this. But it's because I trusted some pretty key folks to get you in this space. But the laughter absolutely carried it. And that's the enjoy your life piece. Man, I'll tell you, that's where it came from, is you have to have some fun in your life. And if you cease having fun and you get in the depressive state, that's the first thing that goes away. Right? Is you don't see that. You lose the things that were fun, but you got to go do them again, get the fun back. Because if you get the fun back, then the positivism that hope brings and the positivism that you taught day in and day out, that positive attack on life, it's so valuable, in multiple facets in this particular case, but positivism will carry the day. And our chief of staff mentioned already that a unit will take on the characteristic of its leaders within 6 weeks. I would say it's at least it can do it faster. It might take a little longer in some cases, but I think that's a valid assessment. Is you will live in that environment that you build, and that's what I spend a lot of time with my commanders right now. Is grow the garden you seek. If you want a place, it's awesome. If you remember from the change of command speak from the first day we met, it's like, get out there and be awesome. And I hear this single lone voice and right behind me going, woo! And what do you know? Off we went. So every day you got to laugh a little bit, and you got to debrief your way through it. But guess what? That's the other side. There's something on the other side. You're going to make a mistake. That's okay.
You bet.
That's an essential part of getting smarter, is making mistakes. So do it sooner, faster, cheaper, hopefully with all the fingers, toeses, and stripeses, all those things intact. But we got to go do that and debrief our way through it. And guess what? It's funny sometimes. I mean, we had some mammoth misspeaks.
Yes.
We probably don't need to mention some of those here.
Yo, I'm the king of misspeaks. But there's one thing that I still carry forward from our year together. And again, like something so simple, because it's the small things that matter. I ask people what their guilty pleasure is on their iPod.
I still do that, man. Absolutely, yeah.
And that was so much fun. And so whether it was your Celt music, Scottish bagpipes, and all that stuff, or my Taylor Swift.
Absolutely.
Those were some of the best conversations that we got to have with our various teammates.
Isn't that true? That's one of the things I value the most about that whole year. We had thousands of people come through our space, yet we had deeply meaningful conversations in short time frames, because you would invest the time. And I learned from that. I had to build an extra gear I didn't have. Those first couple of weeks, man, I was smoked. Being a pretty heavy introvert, and choosing, some of my own time to do the reflections of things, and I really had to build a whole nother gear. But I took your lead on a lot of those things, and it enabled honest, legitimate, well-spent, timely conversations to allocate our time to go spend it with our folks and listen and do some good stuff. And I really valued that time. And when I look back on that year, those are actually the things that I remember. Everything from, I don't know, where do you get off being so awesome with the young communicator coming from the landing zone, or the conversations that we had with any numbers of people, that you get a true, honest answer. Watching youngsters put airplanes together and send them out because they would not leave until they saw their airplane fly. The level of dedication that you get with an honest conversation when you're neck deep in a power cart, greased up, man, that's good living.
Right.
When I see it, that's the best kind of living you got.
Yeah.
So that's goodness. Pushing pallets, sweating. That's the good stuff. So I'm teaching from that experience, actually. We'll probably get to it before long, but oxygen, what's your oxygen? You've asked me that before, and you sent me home one day to go get mine, and I did the same for you, and we went through those kinds of deals to where we had to go get our own oxygen periodically so we could lead better. But oftentimes it was spending 80% of my time with our 20% rock stars. talk about a boost of motivation.
Absolutely.
You know, that inspirational leadership, it came from below. Go figure. So where do you get your motivation from as a leader? That was a key lesson there, because in the crucible of a deployed environment, there's no hiding.
Right.
There's no doubt when you're lacking conviction maybe, or leadership, motivation or fire that your people need, man, you got to go find it. Where is it? Let's go get it. Maybe it was in a massage chair sometime. We're talking and telling jokes.
Group,
The picture of us, I still have it on my phone when you and I are racked out in the back of a C-12, just eating flies, But where do you get your oxygen? And sometimes it's different. Where do you need to get your source of energy? You taught me that, and we got to do that with each other, man. That's a totally cool thing. It's a special relationship for people who don't get to live in this environment between a command chief and a commander. If done correctly, it's a very, very professional level of conversation, and it's intense. And then you have the second half, which is I am your wingman, you are my wingman, I got your six, and it's a level of loyalty, and this will confuse some people perhaps, but it's a loyalty to mission, and it's which is so essential. And it's loyalty to each other, but it's the mission that really drives me in a lot of these cases. So for you to open up the aperture even wider that goes, yes, and is how we also did a lot of stuff together to make sure we were on target with people who are actually doing it. So that command team level and the relationship that we shared in that environment was so critical to the command team and a leadership team, that you got to build all aspects. So where I had shortfalls, you absolutely filled them.
And vice versa.
Check. Absolutely. So
I knew nothing about, still trying to get in the air mobility business. So there wasn't anything tactically or operationally that I could help. So I really tried to put on the other backside stuff, the backside support type stuff, because not much experience that I could give you other than jumping out of your plane.
Well, but see, I beg to differ, because you've been in a fielded condition, like no kidding fielded condition. So from that, you knew what mattered to people. And that's where I saw a lot of strength from you in the field, was anywhere with dealing with or inviting in our mission partners, international partners, cooking pizza for everybody on a Friday night. I mean, it sounds so simple, but that was the one reason why we didn't have a lot of the issues that other installations had, is because they ate pizza with you. Go figure. How simple is that? And so now when the youngsters come up and they go, oh yeah, what are they doing? What are you going to do for blah, blah, blah? I'm like, well, what are you doing for that? Because, all those things that people did for you as an airman, guess what? It's your turn.
Yep.
Give it back.
You bet.
So
pay it forward and do all those
absolutely.
things. Those pizza nights, started off completely selfish, right? It was just something that I want to do. I want to chew up time and help pass the time and get away from the misery of, missing my wife and two sons.
Yes.
But they became cathartic, obviously going through, and then I needed them.
Oh yeah. Well, you're an extreme extrovert. I don't know if anybody's told you that before.
Once, maybe twice.
So yeah, you need people. Occasionally, I need quiet, but I could get quiet in the midst of the noise, which was awesome, and that was truly meaningful in the way that you built the garden, you grew the garden you needed, and guess what? You weren't alone. So grab somebody by the collar as you're doing that, and off you go. And that's how you build a command team to include all the teammates, both commanders and their subsequent the chiefs, and how we took care of each other in a lot of those ways, or had each other's six and kind of checked on how things were going in the business. That was absolutely paramount to getting a couple things done that we needed to. So yes, we had a tremendous numbers of challenges, but many of them were solved. Eating pizza, at a whiskey pit someplace, smoking a cigar. I use the whiskey pit in other locations other than where we were, sadly. But we talked about whiskey a lot. But burning the stogie and actually just kind of, let's have a conversation for a minute. And all those kinds of things came to play. Is every contact mattered. and that was something that was good. And we shared laughter with other people too. Even though I beat you in just about everything we did
One was crap.
More than one.
That putting the fiber together. Now, climbing the antenna, I absolutely lose on that one. That was not in my wheelhouse.
That was
not
that's hilarious.
Climbing that 100, 200 foot antenna.
It's not gonna happen.
Nope. You know, it's funny. I look back over that year of, you know, I would say we ate, I'd say on average, 2 meals together every single day.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, every single day, and whether it was, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas, we get gutted up and help, you know, serve and carve, and those ended up being fun. But you know, those meals, you know, I think were some of our best conversations.
Concur.
And I, you know, just something, you know, for any you know, aspiring leader out there, just kind of get outside the confines of the work environment. You can still talk work.
Yes.
It doesn't feel work. It's just more conversational.
Absolutely.
It isn't forced. It isn't stressed.
Yes.
But we could talk work.
Yeah.
We could, and again, just laugh.
Absolutely.
You know, half of it being at ourselves.
At our safe words, hey, I'm just venting. I don't want you to do anything about this. I just need to get it out there and let you carry it for a while, which was, I think was and oftentimes it ended up in laughter, which was good.
You know,
like, got it.
and we knew that the Vice Colonel Parath, like he needed his spaghetti and meatballs on Thursdays.
It's Pasta Thursday.
Yeah, he came home and he has instituted Pasta Thursday inside his house. I don't know if it's still going on, but I know right when he came home, he's like, yeah, it's Thursday. She's like, you want a spaghetti night? He goes, it's Thursday.
It's Thursday. Yes, we carry some baggage home after a year. That's absolutely true.
You know, and so I will say, number one, I can't thank you enough for truly finding the time to come out to my retirement.
Oh,
it absolutely meant the world to me. That was so. It was just good for my soul for us to see each other again.
Yes.
And as we went through there, and one of the things I mentioned during my retirement speech was that the Air Force system did not bless you with they gave you some bad eggs. I'll just say that there were some personnel challenges that we had to. One of those we had to work through for 6 months. Mm-hmm. The other we had to work through for 12 months.
Yes.
So what do you say to the people out there who have to deal with some of these? I can say toxic leader. Yeah. One was toxic. Yeah. The other one was, I would probably say, incompetent.
Yeah. So there's a couple different studies out there on toxicity, by the way, and some of the sister service documents out there. There's more than one. We only teach kind of one style in our service, but there's multiple styles of things that go towards toxic. An effective leader, ineffective leadership often ends up towards that because of frustration. And I've stolen a lot of stuff from you and properly accredited you probably 6 times, maybe 3. No, I'm kidding. But the expectations, right? Putting expectations out there is something I still hold as very important. So if you set the expectations for what are supposed to happen, then you have a common ground, but you got to do that right away. Otherwise, people are kind of guessing. And it ends up with this, kind of go flashback to the 80s, the latchkey kid who's raising themselves, trying to figure out what the boss wants. So it all starts with setting the appropriate expectations for performance and what you need out of that element. And so you and I got to spend a year, and it seemed a couple of times like we just weren't getting there through the levels of expectation of what I wanted out of integration. I wanted my teammates to be able to know what the next play was so they could lead block or lead work so that they could, make the path smooth for each other and to communicate. I would still say the hardest thing that a wing does, or any organization larger than every organization, to include even marriage organization, if you will, is you got to communicate, and that's the single hardest. We make flying and fixing airplanes look easy. We make defending a base look kind of easy. We make all the other support activities look easy some days because we're good at it. What we don't necessarily do well is communicate well together. And those key elements, as you're getting towards that, I think are the best way to begin to answer for what you asked, which is, how do you deal with that environment? You got to set clear expectations. Here's the performance standard I need out of you. So you got to know where you're going as a leader in order to set the path to get there. So if you do that and you work with your leaders to set the expectation of where you're going, it seems simple, but it's not. And the harder part is with multiple sets of tribes, kind of using that as an analogy, with the different sections of an organization, they all have a different language, a vernacular that's a little bit different. So they need to be able to work with you to interpret, if you will.
Absolutely.
So I'm speaking one language and I need them to be translators into their own units and to make that happen. And likewise, to allow the information flow to go down and to come back through for feedback loop in order to make sure that it works. In some cases in environments, if that breaks and it doesn't work, well, maybe it's a time for a change in leadership. We use the phrase loss of faith and confidence in ability to command. And oftentimes that's kind of where it messes itself, is if I don't have that ability, then it's time for change. And it takes a courageous effort, sometimes a well-documented effort to do that. Sometimes our people, our leaders, sometimes make it easy for them by, when I say easy, painfully easy if they do something illegal that doesn't lead to good environments. But working through that level and really spending time and an investment in the communication piece really gets towards being able to solve a great many of those problems. As we use the True Colors test, some people use Myers-Briggs, there's a couple other personality types of tests out there, and I thought that was absolutely helpful in our leadership techniques so we can learn how to talk to each other.
Absolutely.
And that also lets you harness the diversity that you need. So being able to take that information in and then sculpt your leadership that you need for the unit that you're working with or the organization that you're with aids in that effort. And that's the downstream and back up the stream into the organization. But I use some of those, they're more management techniques arguably, but it's an essential part of the leadership thing I was trying to get done to integrate the operation. But removal of leaders at some point is probably time for that. In some cases, rebuilding the organization if you need to help the leader who's struggling to cover down on some of their limitations, if you will, in order to get the strength from the organization that you need. So sometimes organizational change is part of that. But in all cases, there was an investment in time an investment in assets to help with that communication piece in order to get through it. So it's not easy. If it was easy, CEOs and commanders wouldn't get paid what we do.
Right.
Everybody could do that. But that's something that a command team, because we had the feeds that we had and the work that we had done to establish some of the trust and relationships, we could work through a lot of those efforts. And yes, it took a lot of hard work to do that. But again, in the crucible that is a deployment environment, it's a relentless environment. 24/7, we're working on it, and that's something that's different than maybe a home station command where you get 8-12 hours at home with your family, checked out, if you will. Even though you're plugged in, you still have your oxygen over here. It's not that way in that deployed environment. So there became things we can live with and some things you can't live with in a relationship. And I've kind of lived by that some in my life too. When you can't live with something, you got to change. Something needs to change. So that's where being a change agent and leading your organization through change is so important. And you helped me do that several times with a couple different places where we needed to do some change. And it came out better on the other side. So you can choose to live with the evil you know, or guess what? It might be better on the other side.
Right.
It doesn't have to suck on the other side. It could be better. Grow the garden you want. Invest in it. If it's worth that time, go do it.
Absolutely.
And that's where you and I had some pretty heavy conversations and a little bit of laughter going
Indeed.
on. How do we get here from there? Because I've told you this before. I used every ounce of leadership skill that I knew how, and I had to go find some more because there was that many challenges that we waded our way through and did some good, without a doubt. So
We did.
Pretty happy with that.
And with that, we'll take it to the first break. So stay tuned. We'll be back here with the Commander 314th Airlift Wing, Col Steve Hodge. Well, welcome back for break. We ran a little bit long for the first half here, so maybe got a little 10 minutes back and clean up, hitting some of our last points. But you're talking about expectations.
Sure. Yeah.
And so one of the coolest expectations that you put out firsthand for the front office. For you, the vice commander, Colonel Andy Perath, me as your command chief, our two execs, was you put out who had what kind of power, and so that the executive assistants had knock on your door power, and Colonel Perath and myself, we had open the door power.
Absolutely.
And so it's one of those things that sticks out in my mind. Like that was not only good advice, but I think metaphorically a great way to understand our access to you.
Sure.
And what power we did or didn't have. Haven't seen it before or since. How did you, like, where did you hear that? How did you come up with that? And did you think it would be that impactful?
Well, people talk about open door policy. That's kind of where it comes from. Hey, do you have an open door policy or a closed door policy? Well, yes. So commanders, subordinate commanders always have an open door policy with me. You are absolutely allowed to come in, and I want to talk with you. If you got something that's worth coming to me, I want you in my office to talk. That's how I open that conversation with, and I will make time for you on that one. So the kind of the logical follow-on, as I've been in command for a little while, is, but I have to be somewhat judicious with the time that I have, so that it's focused in places that will do the organization good, and that I can do what I need to do with my day with the allotted amount of time. So that's where the logical follow-on to me became then, well, what do I want? Well, oftentimes a commander will come in and close the door. Okay, good. With that, or if I'm having a closed door session about something that we need to share some time with, who logically can do what? Well, the executive staff, yes, I need you to help me stay on time to respect other people's time, so please come and knock on the door. And if there's something that's important, then knock louder. But then what I often do with my the direct folks is what you alluded to with you and the vice, as command chief and the vice, is a door open policy. I don't care what's going on. You know the essay of the environment, that your situational awareness of the environment, that you know when it's time to open the door. Please do that, so that we can go do what we need to do immediately as necessary. So that was where the logical conclusion came in my mind with who needed to have what authorities and access. Because it sounds like a little bit of a control thing, but there's only a limited amount of time in a day.
Absolutely.
And so from that, I have found that it's very important to make sure that I allocate the right amount of time at the right time, the right place, to go be an effective commander. But I absolutely wanted to empower you and the vice with that conversation, and as direct influencers or leaders with me, that you needed that power, and I wanted you to have that so you could come and make an immediate impact. And the analogy holds true. I will listen to you directly, because you're holding on the matters of our people without a doubt, and the vice had a lot of different things under his purview that needed immediate attention often. So I didn't want to put any barriers in the way, so that was the barrier that I removed for you, is immediate attention for something that you thought was that important, that it is to me too.
And that was so huge for me. And again, aside from the literal application, the metaphorical application was just really great. So that was really inspiring to me. That you thought so much of me and the vice,
right?
And to do that, and Colonel Perath, he had a lot of great one-liners. Some bordered on extreme cynicism, but he had a lot of great one-liners.
There's some fantastic. We had a whole board full.
A whole board full. That was like so amazing. I do have a picture. I'm gonna have to find the picture. But one of the things that I heard late in our tour there that I wish I would have heard sooner, I think I could have helped better, was when he said, he was talking to somebody else, and he's like, yeah, I kind of learned early on that what my boss finds interesting, I should find fascinating.
That's funny, right? Well, it's called focus, right? So there's a difficulty. I mentioned communication earlier. It's hard. It's tough to take vision into action. It really is, because especially with the leaders that we try to raise are very, we'll call it type A for ease of argument. It may not be the correct exact definition, but we want aggressive, action-oriented leaders to go and get stuff done. Well, there's oftentimes you come at, that doesn't work, so you get to that state. But the focus that provided really helped out a couple of subordinate commanders to go, no, the vision is this. This is where we are going. This is the priority as selected. not from a top-down driven thing, is we had actually gathered together and figured out that this is the path that we want to be on. So from that, it's just a gentle nudge to help you keep your focus onto what's important and why. And that's a good phrase. It's kind of funny at times, and at other times it's incredibly accurate. That you need to find things a little bit more, at least intriguing, fascinating. Probably more accurate. Yeah. But I think that was a very helpful conversation. We had a couple different times just to stay on path, on target, especially in that type of environment. And there was a couple things that happened. Towards the end of that year, a couple times I'm finding myself saying, I want another year with this team, because we finally got to where I wanted us to be, and then the band broke up. On to the next one, and our own rotation kicked in, and away we went. So I found it oftentimes that was helpful even for me. Hey, what does my commander find interesting? I think I need to find that fascinating too. So what that also alludes to, and I think might be helpful for some, is I learned a lesson there, which is, what is the sound of empowerment? You and I have had that conversation, and it's almost silent, right? So if you are truly empowered to do your business, the noise coming in from above is pretty quiet. You're on path. If you're aligned strategically, if you're aligned with mission, and you're executing, it's pretty quiet. You should probably project forward.
Ask some questions, right? Make sure you're still within your left and right limits.
Yes.
And still drive forward.
And it's incumbent upon the commander to do that, is to make sure your alignment's on, and that's where we have commander conferences and senior leader kind of conferences, and you and I would eat at lunch and dinner, and sometimes midnight chow, and maybe M&Ms, a couple pizzas,
some
Oreos, yeah, absolutely. But that's where we got our alignment done, was that, and then off you went, and I wasn't in your chili anymore. So that was how we can align. It kind of aligns itself with that quotation. It's pretty helpful in that fashion.
And it was really nice for me coming over there with the internal stuff. Was you clearly said, hey, this is your lane, this is your lane, which kind of helped me whenever possible take stuff off of your desk.
Absolutely.
And so for any aspiring leader, look for that, both up and down. Look what you can do to take stuff off of your boss's desk, put some white space on their calendar, heaven forbid, and then make sure that from below, some people are maybe trying to take stuff off of your plate, if you need to, and go forward.
And it's talent management, right? So I gave you stuff go do it, have at it. You're going to be great at it, and oh, by the way, you work. So, and that's when we empowered our people to go do some stuff. I was often well more than I could have dreamed of. So they're going to go do great things with that, and it just gives them the space to delegate it. I can't control it all. Shouldn't try to control it all. I probably need a heads up of what's going on occasionally, but that's how you run business. Get out there.
And for me personally, I really appreciated our base was swapping out lodging. So we had to tear down lodging, double people up in these buildings, so mass capacity in these buildings while we built these other trailers, moved them in and kind of moved out. So there's huge working mess of people, going through, and for the fact that you stayed relatively out of it. Yes. It just made me the POC for that, to work with the other agencies on base to make sure that I found, I really appreciated that.
Absolutely.
And that was one of the things that you empowered me with. And so I felt that I had your full weight, and back brief you with everything that happened, and here's what's up. Here are kind of known hiccups. That was a lot of fun. That was very interesting. And so
there's a sense of ownership. I mean, it just shows. And our people that embrace their tasks like that, they always came through.
You bet. And so as the podcast comes to a close, and I look back on that year, for me that ended up being the first of 2 years away from my family.
Yes.
So that ended up being very, very difficult, and so that was really tough. But I miss our conversations.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt.
And so and I'd worked for two wing commanders before that when I was at Joint Base McGuire Dix Lakers. Both of them phenomenal individuals, still great friends. But we didn't have dinner every single night or lunch every single day together. So I like the exposure that I think you and I had is at least double, if not triple, that than would have been, I think, in a normal stateside type of environment.
Absolutely.
All crammed into 1 year,
Yeah.
while we're without our families and the ones that we love most, and having to rely on each other to get us through that.
Yeah.
And man, I couldn't have asked for a better boss and friend.
Likewise, Chachi, it was a fantastic experience. And one of the better, best and worst years of my life, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Just for all the same things you just said. What a phenomenal place to work with people that are just fantastic, and then just to unfortunately do that away from those that we love, but you're doing it for them. So there's solace in some of those things. But now, with the gray beard and going on and embracing, you know what you have in your own life now, and it's just golden. Just good. That's the good stuff, man. Get after it.
100%. Colonel Hodge, great
Right.
seeing you. Thanks for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you again, get you on further episodes.
Come on, absolutely.
And we'll do that. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you here next time on the Cape Lead Revolution.